Oh, I'm having technical issues. Am I still going? Am I still live? Apologies for any internet troubles. I'm currently in a hotel with not so great Wi-Fi at the moment because of my flat issues. But if you missed part 1, we did the first 2 chapters of The Hobbit on Tolkien Reading Day on Saturday. The upload is now on YouTube, so check out Scottish Skibby Gang on YouTube, where you can check out the read through of the first 2 chapters. Right, bear with me. I'm having technical issues. Hello, hi guys, thank you for joining again. Right, bear with me while I deal with some technical difficulties. Right, I'm going to move my light 2 seconds. So yes, we are going to be doing our Hobbit read-through. We're going to be going from chapter 3, I think. If you missed the first 2 chapters, if you missed the first one of these, it's now on YouTube. There we are. There's some lighting. Make it more hobbity. There we go. Right. Apologies for the weird Dutch angle. It's just the way everything's cobbled together. But we got to the section in the story where they just defeated the trolls, where the trolls had turned to stone, and they'd gone through the goblins' belongings and found Sting, as well as Orcrist and Glamdring. So if you missed that, we had a good old Hobbit sing-song, or a Dwarven sing-song, which was a real treat for everyone, because I can't sing to save my life. Show feet. Will you guys like this live more if I show feet? Oh, thank you, Max, for all the likes. So I'm just gonna kick off. I'm gonna get nice and comfy and kick off with chapter 3, a short rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather had improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but not much in their bags, even with what they had got from the trolls. One morning, they forded a river at a wide, shallow place full of noise and of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw the great mountains and marched down very near to them. Already, they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of Snow Peak gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He'd never seen a thing look so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains. We have got to get through, or over, or under those somehow, before we can go on to the Wilderland beyond. And it is a deal of a way even from the other side of them, to the Lonely Mountain in the east, where Smaug lies with our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, and just at that moment he felt more tired than he'd ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favourite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing. Not for the last time. If you're just joining us, we're reading The Hobbit. And yes, I am wearing a full Hobbit cosplay for this, because anything I do is in cosplay. So we're just getting to the Misty Mountains. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for," he said. We need food for one thing, and rest in reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them, and have to come back and start at the beginning again, if you ever get back at all. They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, You are come to the very edge of the wild, as some of you may know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives in the last homely house. I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected. That sounded very nice and comforting, but they had not got there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valleys and no hills to break the ground in front of them. Only one vast slope going slowly up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain. A wide land, the colour of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of grass green and moss green showing where water might be. Morning passed. Afternoon came. But in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down surprised to see the trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall, but a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would have never come out again. It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than ever you would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small and others were half covered with moss or heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones, and they followed his lead, but they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped in the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of pine made him drowsy, so that every now and then he nodded and nearly fell off or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak. Oh, sorry, I'm getting sleepy already. Treat this as your bedtime story, guys. I certainly am. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. Yeah, honestly, do you realise why I'm not looking at the chat much, so I don't lose my place, because I'm really bad at reading and acting at the same time. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then there came a burst of song like laughter in the trees. Honestly, I'm going to skip this song because I don't know how it goes, and I did a lot of singing the last time. So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think. Not that they would care. They would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them as the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think. Or get annoyed with them, for some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all, at their beards. "Well, well," said a voice. "Just look. Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear. Isn't it delicious?" "Most astonishing! Wonderful!" Then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one I have written down in full. At last, one, a tall young fellow, came out from the trees and bowed to Gandalf and to Thorin. "Welcome to the valley," he said. "Thank you," said Thorin a bit gruffly, but Gandalf was already off his horse and among the elves, talking merrily with them. "You are a little out your way," said the elf. "That is, if you are making for the only path across the water and to the house beyond." I don't know why the elves are Irish. We'll stick with it. "We will set you right, but you have best get on foot." I think they should be Welsh, if anything, really. "Until you are over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us, or will you go straight on? Supper is preparing over there," he said. "I can smell the wood fires for the cooking." Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay a while. Elvish singing is not a thing to miss, and in June under the stars, not if you care for such things. Also, he would have liked a few private words with these people that seemed to know his names and all about him, though he had never seen them before. He thought their opinion of his venture might be interesting. Elves know a lot and are wondrous folk for news, and know what is going on among the peoples of the land, as quick as water flows, or quicker. But the dwarves were all for supper as soon as possible just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies till they were brought to a good path, and so at last to the very brink of a river. It was flowing fast and noisily, as mountain streams do of a summer evening, when sun had been all day on the snow far up above. There was only a narrow bridge of stone without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could walk well on, and over that they had to go, slow and careful, one by one, each leading his pony by the bridle. This is the problem, I can't read. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and they sang a merry song as the party went across. "Don't dip your beard in the foam, father," they cried to Thorin, who was bent almost on his hands and knees. "It is almost long enough without watering it." "Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes," they called. "He's too fat to get through the keyholes yet." "Hush, hush, good people, and good night." "Hush, hush, good people, and good night," said Gandalf, who came last. "Valleys have ears, and some elves have over-merry tongues. Good night." And so at last they all came to the last homely house, and found its doors flung wide. Now, it is a strange thing, but things that are good to have and days that are good to spend are soon told about, and not much to listen to, while things that are uncomfortable, palpitating, and even gruesome may make a good tale and take a deal of telling anyway. They stayed long in that good house, 14 days at least, and they found it hard to leave. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there for ever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble. Yet there is little to tell about their stay. The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose fathers came into the strange stories before the beginning of history. The wars of the evil goblins and the elves and the first men in the north. In those days of our tale, there were still some people who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors, and Elrond, the master of the house, was their chief. He was as noble and as fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, as wise as a wizard, as venerable as the king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. See, this is the thing. This is where the movies really missed a trick. Elrond's meant to be like really kind and homely and lovely. He comes into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect. Whether you liked food, or sleep, or work, or storytelling, or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all, evil things did not come into that valley. I wish I had time to tell you even a few of the tales, or one or two of the songs that they heard in the house. All of them, the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in a few days there. Their clothes were mended, as well as their bruises, their tempers, and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions, light to carry, but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. Their plans were improved with the best advice. So the time came to Midsummer Eve, and they were to go on again, with the early sun on Midsummer morning. Elrond knew all about runes of every kind. That day he looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair, and he said, These are not of troll make. They are old swords, very old swords, of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the goblin wars. They must have come from a dragon's hoard or goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city long ago. This, Thorin, the rune's name Orcrist, the goblin cleaver. In the ancient tongue of Gondolin, it was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamdring, foe hammer that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well. Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder? Said Thorin, looking at his sword with new interest. I could not say, said Elrond, but one may guess that your trolls have plundered and other plunderers, or come on the remnants of old robberies in some hold on the mountains. I have heard that there are still forgotten treasures of old to be found in the deserted caverns of the mines of Moria, since the dwarf and goblin war. Thorin pondered these words. I will keep this sword in honour, he said. May it soon cleave goblins once again. I wish that is likely to be granted soon enough in the mountains, said Elrond. But show me now your map. He took it and gazed at it, and he shook his head, for it did not altogether approve of dwarves and their love of gold. He hated dragons and their cruel wickedness, and he grieved to remember the ruin of the town of Dale and its merry bells, and the burned banks of the river running. The moon was shining in a broad silver crescent. He held up the map, and the white light shone through it. What is this? He said. There are moon letters here, beside plain runes which say 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast. What are moon letters? Asked the Hobbit, full of excitement. He loved maps, and I've told you before. And he also liked runes and letters and cunning handwriting, though when he wrote himself it was a bit thin and spidery. Moon letters are rune letters, but you cannot see them, said Elrond. Not when you look straight at them. They can only be seen when the moon shines behind them. And what is more, with the more cunning sort, it must be a moon of the same shape and season as the day they were written. The dwarves invented them and wrote them with silver pens, as your friends could tell you. These must have been written on a midsummer's eve in a crescent moon a long while ago. What do they say? Asked Gandalf and Thorin together, a bit vexed perhaps that even Elrond should have found this out first, though really there had not been a chance before, and there would not have been another until goodness knows when. Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, read Elrond, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole. Durin, said Thorin. He was the father of the fathers of the eldest race of dwarves. The Longbeards, and my first ancestor. I am his heir. Then what is Durin's day? Asked Elrond. The first day of the dwarves' new year, said Thorin, is as all should know the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter. We still call it Durin's day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together, but this will not help us much, I fear, for it passes our skill in these days to guess when such a time will come again." "That remains to be seen," said Gandalf. "Is there any more writing?" "None to be seen by this moon," said Elrond, and he gave the map back to Thorin, and they went down the water. They went down to the water to see the elves dance and sing upon the Midsummer's Eve. The next morning was a midsummer's morning, as fair and fresh as could be dreamed, blue sky, and never a cloud, and the sun dancing on the water. Now they rode away amid songs of farewell and good speed, with their hearts ready for more adventure, and with a knowledge of the road they must follow over the misty mountains, to the land beyond. Let's continue for a bit. Chapter 4. Over Hill and Under Hill. There were many paths that led up into those mountains, and many passes over them. But most of the paths were cheats and deceptions, and led nowhere to bad ends. Most of the passes were infested by evil things and dreadful dangers. The dwarves and the Hobbit, helped by the wise advice of Elrond and the knowledge and memory of Gandalf, took the right road to the right pass. Long days after they had climbed out of the valley and left the last homely house miles behind, they were still going up and up. It was a hard path and a dangerous path, a crooked way and a lonely and a long. Now they could look back over the lands they had left, laid out far behind them, far below. Far, far away in the west, where things were blue and faint, Bilbo knew there lay his own country of safe and comfortable things, and his little hobbit hole. He shivered. It was getting bitter cold up here, and the wind came shrill amongst the rocks. Boulders, too, at times came galloping down the mountainsides, let loose by midday sun upon the snow, and passed among them, which was lucky, or over their heads, which was alarming. The nights were comfortless and chill. They did not dare to sing or talk too loud, for the echoes were uncanny, and the silence seemed to dislike being broken, except by the noise of water and the wail of wind and the crack of stone. The summer is getting on down below, thought Bilbo, and haymaking is going on and picnics. It will be harvesting and blackberrying before we even begin to down the other side of this rate. And the others were thinking equally gloomy thoughts, although when they said goodbye to Elrond in the high hope of a midsummer morning, they had spoken gaily of the passage of the mountains and of riding swift across the lands beyond. They had thought of coming to the secret door in the lonely mountain, perhaps that very next last moon of autumn. And perhaps it will be Durin's Day, they said. Only Gandalf had shaken his head and said nothing. Dwarves had not passed that way for many years, but Gandalf had, and he knew how evil and danger had grown and thriven in the world, since the dragons had driven men from the lands, and the goblins had spread in secret after the battle of the Mines of Moria. Even the good plans of wise wizards like Gandalf and of good friends like Elrond go astray sometimes when you're off on a dangerous adventure over the edge of the wild, and Gandalf was as wise a wizard to know it. He knew that something unexpected might happen, and he hardly dared to hope that they would pass without some fearful adventure over those great tall mountains with lonely peaks and valleys where no king ruled. They did not. All was well, until one day they met a thunderstorm. More than a thunderstorm, a thunder battle. You know how terrific a really big thunderstorm can be down in the land and in a river valley, especially at times when two great thunderstorms meet and clash. More terrible still are thunder and lightning in the mountains at night, when storms come up from east and west and make war. The lightning splinters on the peaks and the rocks shiver. The great crashes split the air and go on rolling and tumbling into the very cave below. And the darkness is filled with overwhelming noise and sudden light. Bilbo had never seen or imagined anything. I'm losing an ear. Excuse me while I fix my ear. Sorry, we are on chapter 4 now. Is that right? Yeah, chapter 4 of The Hobbit. Overhill and Underhill. Not chapter 12, chapter 4. At least in this copy. If you want to see me read the first 2 chapters, and if you want to see any replays of these, they'll be uploaded to the YouTube. Bilbo had never seen or imagined anything of the kind. They were high up in a narrow place with a dreadful fall into a dim valley at one side of them. There they were, sheltering under a hanging rock for the night, and he lay beneath a blanket and shook from head to toe. When he peeped out in the lightning flashes, he saw that across the valley the stone giants were out, and they were hurling rocks at one another for a game, and catching them and tossing them down into the darkness, where they smashed among the trees far below, or splintered into little bits with a bang. Then came a wind and a rain, and the wind whipped the rain and the hail about in every direction, so that an overhanging rock was no protection at all. Soon they were getting drenched, and their ponies were standing with their heads down and their tails between their legs, and some of them were whinnying with fright. They could hear the giants guffawing and shouting all over the mountainsides. "This won't do at all," said Thorin. "If we don't get blown off or drowned, or struck by lightning, we shall be picked up by some giant and kicked sky high for a football." Apparently they have golf and football in Middle-earth, didn't you? Here's a little picture. Anyone want to see a picture? Misty Mountains. "Well, if you know anywhere better, take us there," said Gandalf, who was feeling very grumpy and was far from happy about the giants himself. The end of their argument was that they sent Fili and Kili to look for a better shelter. They had very sharp eyes, being the youngest of the dwarves by some 50 years. They usually got these sort of jobs when everybody could see that it was absolutely no use sending Bilbo. There is nothing like looking if you want to find something, or so Thorin said to the young dwarves. You certainly usually find something if you look, but it is not always quite the something you were after. So it proved on this occasion. Soon Fili and Kili came crawling back, holding on to the rocks in the wind. "We've found a dry cave," they said. "Not far round the next corner, and the ponies and all could get inside." "Have you thoroughly explored it?" said the wizard, who knew that caves up in the mountains were seldom unoccupied. Yes, they said, though everybody knew they could not have been long about it. They had come back too quick. "It isn't all that big, and it does not go far back." That, of course, is the dangerous part about caves. You don't know how far they go back, sometimes, or where a passage may lead to, or what is waiting for you inside. But now Fili and Kili's news seemed good enough, so they all got up and prepared to move. The wind was howling and thunder still growling, and they had a business getting themselves and their ponies along. Still, it was not very far to go, and before long they came to a big rock standing out in the path. If you stepped behind, you saw a low arch in the side of the mountain. There was just enough room to get the ponies through with a squeeze, and they had been unpacked and unsaddled. As they passed under the arch, it was good to hear the wind and the rain outside instead of all about them, and to feel safe from the giants and their rocks. But the wizard was taking no risks. He lit up his wand, as he did that day in Bilbo's dining room that seemed so long ago, if you remember, and by its light they explored the cave from end to end. It seemed quite a fair size, but not too large and mysterious. It had a dry floor and some comfortable nooks. At one end there was a room for the ponies, and there they stood, mighty glad of the change, steaming and champing in their nose bags. Owen and Glóin wanted to light a fire at the door to dry their clothes, but Gandalf would not hear of it. So they spread out their wet things on the floor and got dry ones out their bundles. Then they made their blankets comfortable, got out their pipes and blew smoke rings, which Gandalf turned into different colours and set dancing up by the roof to amuse them. They talked and forgot about the storm, and discussed what each would do with his share of treasure, when they got it, which at the moment did not seem so impossible. And so they dropped off to sleep, one by one. And that was the last time that they used the ponies, the packages, the baggages, tools, and paraphernalia that they had brought with them. It turned out a good thing that night they had brought little Bilbo with them, after all, for somehow he could not go to sleep for a long while, and when he did sleep, he had very nasty dreams. I know, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, I really appreciate that. We're almost at 2,000 likes, oh my god. We're getting to the chapter we're getting close to the chapter I was really excited about, I think. You guys can probably guess which one I'm excited to do. For somehow, he could not go to sleep for a long while, and when he did, he had very nasty dreams. He dreamed that a crack in the wall at the back of the cave got bigger and bigger, and opened wider and wider, and he was very afraid, but could not call out or do anything about but lie and look. And then he dreamed that the floor of the cave was giving way, and he was slipping, beginning to fall down, goodness knows where to. At that, he woke up with a horrible start, and found that that part of the dream was true. A crack had opened at the back of the cave, and was already a wide passage. He was just in time to see the last of the ponies' tails disappearing into it. Of course, he gave a very loud yell, as loud a yell as a hobbit can give, which is very surprising for their size. Out jumped the goblins, big goblins, great ugly-looking goblins. Lots of goblins, before you could say rocks and blocks. There were 6 to each dwarf, at least, and 2 even for Bilbo, and they were all grabbed and carried through the crack, before you could say tinder and flint. But not Gandalf. Bilbo's yell had done that much good. It had wakened him up wide in a splintered second, and when goblins came to grab him, there was a terrific flash with like lightning in the cave, and a smell like gunpowder, and several of them fell dead. The crack closed with a snap, and Bilbo and the dwarves were on the wrong side of it. Where was Gandalf? Of that neither they nor the goblins had any idea, and the goblins did not wait to find out. They seized Bilbo and the dwarves and hurried them along. And it was deep, dark, such as only goblins that have taken to living in the heart of the mountains can see through. The passages that were crossed and tangled in all directions, but the goblins knew their way, as well as you do, to the nearest post office, and they went down and down. And it was most horribly stuffy. The goblins were very rough, and pinched unmercifully, and chuckled and laughed in their horrible stony voices. And Bilbo was more unhappy even when the troll had picked him up by his toes. He wished again and again for his nice bright hobbit hole. Not for the last time. Now there came a glimmer of a red light before them. The goblins began to sing or croak, keeping time with the flap of their flat feet on the stone, and shaking their prisoners as well. Clap, snack, the black, crack, grip, grab, pinch, nab, and down to Goblin Town you go, my lad. Clash, crash, crush, smash, hammer and tongs, knocker and gongs, pound, pound, for underground, ho, ho, my lad. Swish, smack, whip, crack, batter and beat and yammer and bleat, work, work, nor dare to shirk, while goblins cough and goblins laugh, round and round for underground below, my lad. It sounded truly terrifying. Yeah, I know. Tolkien's a weird writer. It takes you out of it sometimes. The walls echoed to the clap, snap, and the crush, smash, and to the ugly laughter of their ho, ho, my lad. The general meaning of the song was only too plain, For now the goblins took out whips and whipped them with a swish, smack, and sent them running as fast as they could in front of them. And more than one of the dwarves were already yammering and bleating like anything when they stumbled into a big cavern. Have you guys ever seen the, was it the Rakenbass version of Return of the King? With the where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, we don't want to have to go to war today. Yeah, Lord of the Rings is nothing like this tonally. That's the thing, they really, and same with the Silmarillion, like, none of them have the same tone. This is a nice, like, chill bedtime story compared to Lord of the Rings. That's why I chose this one. I thought we actually stood a chance of making it through the story. It was lit by a great red fire in the middle, and by torches along the walls, and it was full of goblins. They all laughed and stamped and clapped their hands when the dwarves, with poor little Bilbo at the back and nearest to the whips, came running in, while the goblin drivers whipped and cracked their whips behind. The ponies were already huddled there in a corner, and there were all the baggages and packages lying broken open, and even being rummaged by goblins, and smelt by goblins, and fingered by goblins, and quarrelled over by goblins. I'm afraid that was the last they ever saw of those excellent little ponies, including a jolly sturdy little white fellow that Elrond had lent to Gandalf, since his horse was not suitable for the mountain paths. For goblins eat horses and ponies and donkeys and other much more dreadful things. And they're always hungry. Just now, however, the prisoners were thinking only of themselves. The goblins chained their hands behind their backs and linked them all together in a line and dragged them to the far end of the cavern, with little Bilbo tugging at the end of the rope. There, in the shadows, on a large flat stone, sat a tremendous goblin with a huge head, and armed goblins were standing around him, carrying axes and the bent swords that they use. Now goblins are cruel and wicked and bad-hearted. They make no beautiful things, but they make many clever ones. Just for you guys getting the right picture, I believe that orc and goblin, so the term used in this book is goblin, but you should think of them as orcs. They're not really separate races, particularly. They're essentially Tolkien synonyms. That's something the movie didn't quite nail, amongst many other things. They can tunnel and mine as well as any but the most skilled dwarves, and when they take the trouble, though they are usually untidy and dirty. Hammers, axes, swords, daggers, pickaxes, tongs, and also instruments of torture they make very well, or get other people to make to their design, prisoners and slaves that have to work till they die for want of air and light. It is not unlikely that they invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them, and also not working with their own hands more than they could help, but in those days, and those wild parts, they had not advanced, as it's called, so far. And this is the thing, Tolkien hated the mechanization of the world, so this is a massive theme, is the evil that's marring Middle-earth is the mechanization of it. No, that is actually something, the movies added a lot of bullshit, but actually the goblin stuff is legit. Where the fuck was I? They did not hate dwarves especially, no more than they hated everybody and everything, and particularly the orderly and prosperous. In some parts, wicked dwarves had even made alliances with them. But they had a special grudge against Thorin's people, because of the war which you have heard mentioned, but which does not come into this tale. And anyway, goblins don't care who they catch, as long as it is done smart and secret, and the prisoners are not able to defend themselves. "And who are these miserable persons?" said the great goblin. "Dwarves and this," said one of the drivers, pulling at Bilbo's chain so that he fell forward onto his knees.
"We found them sheltering on our front porch." "And what do you mean by it?"
said the great goblin, turning to Thorin.
"Up to no good, I'll warrant. Spying on the private businesses of my people, I guess. Thieves, I shouldn't be surprised to learn. Murderers and friends of elves are not unlikely. Come, what have you got to say?"
"Thorin the dwarf, at your service," he replied. It was merely a polite nothing. "Of the things which you suspect and imagine, we have no idea at all. We sheltered from a storm in what seemed a convenient cave and unused. Nothing was further from our thoughts than inconveniencing goblins in any way whatsoever." And that was true enough.
Said the great goblin. "So you say. Might I ask what you're doing in the mountains at all? And where you were coming from? And where you're going to? In fact, I should like to know all about you. Not that it will do you much good, Thorin Oakenshield. I know too much about your folk already, but let's have the truth, or I will prepare something particularly uncomfortable for you."
Shockingly so. "We are on a journey to visit our relatives, our nephews and nieces, and first, second, and third cousins, and the other descendants of our great-grandfathers who live on the east side of those truly hospitable mountains," said Thorin, not quite knowing what to say at all at once in a moment, when obviously the exact truth would not do at all.
"He is a liar, a truly tremendous one," said one of the drivers. "Several of our people were struck by lightning in the cave when we visited these creatures to come below, and they are dead as stones. Also, he has not explained this."
He held out the sword which Thorin had worn, the sword that came from the troll's lair. The great goblin gave a truly awful howl of rage when he looked at it, and all his soldiers gnashed their teeth, clashed their shields, and stamped. They knew the sword at once. It had killed hundreds of goblins in its time, when the fair elves of Gondolin hunted them in the hills or did battle before their walls. They had called it Orcrist, Goblin Cleaver, but the goblins simply called it Biter. They hated it, and hated worse anyone that carried it.
"Murderers and elf friends,"
the great goblin shouted.
"Slash them, beat them, bite them, gnash them, take them away to the dark holes full of snakes. Never let them see the light again."
He was in such a rage that he jumped off his seat and himself rushed at Thorin with his mouth open. And just at that moment, all the lights in the cavern went out, and the great fire went out, poof, into a tower of blue, glowing smoke right up to the roof that scattered piercing white sparks all among the goblins. The yells and yammering, croaking, gibbering and jabbering, and howls and growls and curses, shrieking and skriking and that followed were beyond description. Several hundred wildcats and wolves being roasted slowly alive together would have not compared to it. The sparks were burning holes in the goblins, and the smoke that now fell from the roof made the air too thick for even their eyes to see through. Soon they were falling over one another and rolling in heaps on the floor, biting and kicking and fighting as they had all gone mad. Suddenly a sword flashed in its own light, and Goblin saw it go right through the great goblin as he stood dumbfounded in the middle of his rage. He fell dead, and the goblin soldiers fled before the sword shrieking into the darkness. The sword went back into its sheath. "Follow me, quick!" said a voice fierce and quiet, and before Bilbo understood what had happened, he was trotting along again, as fast as he could trot, at the end of the line, down more dark passages with the yells of Goblin Hall growing fainter behind him. A pale light was leading them on. "Quicker! Quicker!" said the voice. "The torches will soon be relit." "Half a minute," said Dory, who was at the back next to Bilbo, and was a decent fellow. He made the hobbit scramble on his shoulders as best he could with his tied hands, and then off they all went at a run, with a clink-clank of chains and many a stumble, since they had no hands to steady themselves with. Not for a long while did they stop, and by that time they must have been right down in the very mountain's heart. And then Gandalf lit up his wand. Of course it was Gandalf. Just then they were too busy to ask how he got there. He took out his sword again, and again it flashed in the dark by itself. It burned with a rage that made it gleam if goblins were about. Now it was bright as blue flame for a delight in the killing of the great lord of the cave. It made no trouble whatever of cutting through the goblin chains and setting all the prisoners free as quickly as possible. This sword's name was Glamdring, the foe hammer, if you remember. The goblins called it Beater, and hated it worse than Biter, if possible. Orcris, too, had been saved, for Gandalf had brought it along as well as snatching it from one of the terrified guards. Gandalf thought of most things, and though he could not do everything, he thought he could do a great deal for his friends in a tight corner. "Are we all here?" he said, landing his sword back to Thorin with a bow. "Let me see. 1, that's Thorin. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Where are Philly and Killy? Here they are. 12, 13. And here's Mr. Baggins, 14. Well, well, it might be worse, but then again it could be a great deal better. No ponies, no food, and no knowing quite where we are, and hordes of angry goblins just behind. On we go." On they went. Gandalf was quite right. They began to hear goblin noises and horrible cries far behind them in the passages they had come through. That sent them on faster than ever, and as poor Bilbo could not possibly go half as fast, for dwarves can roll along at a tremendous pace, I can tell you, when they have to. They took it in turn to carry him on their backs. What is this? Is this more mood lighting? Is that more dramatic? I can't actually read that well. That's the only problem. I'll maybe do that for riddles in the dark. I'll make it more dramatic. Still, goblins go faster than dwarves, and these goblins knew the way better, and they had made the path themselves, and they were madly angry, so to do what they could, the dwarves heard the cries and howls getting closer and closer. Soon they could hear even the flap of the goblin feet, many, many feet, which only just seemed just around the corner. The blink of red torches could be seen behind them in the tunnel they were following, and they were getting deadly tired. "Why, oh, why did I ever leave my hobbit hole?" said poor Mr. Baggins, bumping up and down on Bomber's back. "Why, oh, why did I ever bring a wretched little hobbit on a treasure hunt?" said poor Bomber, who was fat and staggered along with the sweat dripping down his nose in a heat of terror. At this point, Gandalf fell behind, and Thorin with him. They turned a sharp corner. "About turn!" he shouted. "Draw your sword, Thorin!" There was nothing else that could be done, and the goblins did not like it. They came scurrying around the corner in full cry, and found Goblin Cleaver and Foe Hammer shining cold and bright right in their astonished eyes. The ones in front dropped their torches and gave one yell before they were killed. The ones behind them still yelled more and leaped back, knocking over those that were running after them. "Biter and Beater!" they shrieked, and soon they were all in confusion, and some of them were hustling back the way they had come. It was quite a long while before any of them dared to turn that corner. By the time the dwarves had gone on again, a long, long way onto the dark tunnels of the goblin realm. When the goblins discovered that, they put out their torches and they slipped on soft shoes, and they chose out their very quickest runners with the sharpest ears and eyes. These ran forward as swift as weasels in the dark, and with hardly any more noise than bats. And that is why neither Bilbo, nor the dwarves, nor even Gandalf heard them coming, nor did they see them. But they were seen by the goblins that ran silently up behind, for Gandalf was letting his wand give out a faint light to help the dwarves as they went along. Quite suddenly, Dory, now at the back again carrying Bilbo, was grabbed from behind in the dark. He shouted and fell, and the hobbit rolled off his shoulders in the blackness, bumped his head on hard rock, and remembered nothing more. Chapter 5. Riddles in the Dark. Here's a really important one, guys. When Bilbo opened his eyes, he wondered if he had, for it was... Should we do dramatic lighting? For it was just as dark as with them shut. No one was anywhere near him. Just imagine his fright. He could hear nothing, see nothing, and he could feel nothing except the stone of the floor. Very slowly he got up and groped about on all fours until he touched the wall of the tunnel, but neither up nor down could he find anything. Nothing at all. No sign of goblins, no sign of dwarves. His head was swimming, and he was far from certain even of the direction they'd been going in when he had his fall. He guessed as well as he could, and crawled along for a good way, until suddenly his hand met what felt like a tiny ring of cold metal lying on the ground of the floor of the tunnel. It was a turning point in his career, but he did not know it. He put the ring in his pocket almost without thinking. Certainly it did not seem of any particular use at the moment. He did not go much further, but sat down on the cold floor and gave himself up to the complete miserableness for a long while. He thought of himself frying bacon and eggs in his own kitchen at home, for he could feel inside that it was high time for some meal or another, but that could only make him more miserabler. He could not think what to do, nor could he think what had happened, or why he had been left behind, or why, if he had been left behind, the goblins had not caught him, or even why his head was so sore. The truth was, he'd been lying quiet, out of sight and out of mind, in a very dark corner for a long while. After some time he felt for his pipe. It was not broken, and that was something. Then he felt for his pouch, and there was some tobacco in it, and that was something more. Then he felt for matches, and he could not find any at all, and that shattered his hope completely. Just as well for him, as he agreed when he came to his senses. Goodness knows what the striking of matches and the smell of tobacco would have brought on him out of the dark holes in the horrible place. Still, at the moment he felt very crushed, but in slapping all his pockets and feeling all around himself for matches, his hand came on the hilt of his little sword. The little dagger that he got from the trolls, that he had quite forgotten, nor fortunately had the goblins noticed it, as he wore it inside his breeches. Now he drew it out. It shone pale and dim before his eyes. So it is an elvish blade too, he thought, and goblins are not very near, and yet not far enough. But somehow he was comforted. It was rather splendid to be wearing a blade made in Gondolin for the Goblin Wars, of which so many songs had been sung, and also he had noticed that such weapons made a great impression on goblins that came upon them suddenly. Go back, he thought? No good at all. Go sideways? Impossible. Go forward? Only thing to do. On we go. And so he got up and trotted along with his little sword held in front of him, and one hand feeling the wall, and his heart all of a pitter-patter. Now certainly, Bilbo was in what is called a tight place, but you must remember, it was not so tight for him as it would have been for me or you. Hobbits are not quite like ordinary people. After all, if their holes are nice cheery places and properly aired, quite different from the tunnels of the goblins, still they are more used to tunnelling than we are, and they do not easily lose their sense of direction underground. Not when their heads are recovered from being bumped. Also, they can move very quietly and hide easily, and recover wonderfully from falls and bruises, and they have a fund for wisdom and wise sayings that men have mostly never heard or forgotten long ago. I should not have liked to have been in Mr. Baggins's place all the same. The tunnel seemed to have no end. All he knew that it was still going down pretty steadily and keeping in the same direction in spite of a twist and a turn or two. There were passages leading off to the very side of every now and then, and as he knew by the glimmer of his sword, or could feel with his hand on the wall. Of these he took no notice, except to hurry past for fear of goblins or half-imagined dark things coming out of them. And on he went, and down, and still he heard no sound of anything except the occasional whir of a bat by his ears, which startled him at first, till it became too frequent to bother about. I do not know how long he kept on like this, hating to go on, not daring to stop, on and on until he was tireder and tired. It seemed like all the way to tomorrow and over it to the days beyond. Suddenly, without any warning, he trotted splash into water. Ugh! It was icy cold. That pulled him up sharp and short. He did not know whether it was just a pool in the path or the edge of an underground stream across the passage or the brink of a deep, dark, subterranean lake. The sword was hardly shining at all. He stopped, and he could hear, when he listened hard, drip, drops, drip, drip, dripping from an unseen roof in the water below. But there seemed no sort of sound other than that. So is it a pool or a lake, and not an underground river, he thought. Still, he did not dare to wade out into the darkness. He could not swim, and he thought too of nasty, slimy things with big, bulging, blind eyes wriggling in the water. There are strange things living in the pools and lakes in the hearts of the mountains. Fish whose fathers swam in, goodness knows how many years ago, and never swam back out again, while their eyes grew bigger and bigger and bigger from trying to see in the blackness. Also, there are other things more slimy than fish. Even in the tunnels and caves the goblins have made themselves, there are other things living unbeknown to them that have sneaked in from outside to lie up in the dark. Some of those caves, too, go back in their beginnings to ages before the goblins, who only widened them and joined them with other passages, and the original owners are still there in odd corners, slinking and noising about. Deep down by the dark water lived old Gollum, a small, slimy creature. I don't know where he came from, nor who or what he was. He was Gollum, as dark as darkness, except for two big, round, pale eyes in his thin face. He had a little boat, and he rowed about quite quietly on the lake, for a lake it was, wide and deep, and deadly cold. He paddled it with large feet dangling over the side, but never a ripple did he make. Not he. He was looking out of his pale lamp-like eyes for blind fish, which he grabbed with his long fingers as quick as thinking. He liked meat too. Goblin he thought good when he could get it, but he took care they never found him out. He just throttled them from behind if they ever came down alone anywhere near the edge of the water while he was prowling about. They very seldom did, for they had a feeling that something unpleasant was lurking down there, down at the roots of the mountain. They had come on the lake when they were tunneling down long ago, and when they found they could go no further, so their road ended in that direction, and there was no reason to go that way, unless the great goblin sent them. Sometimes he took a fancy for fish from the lake, and sometimes neither goblin nor fish came back. Actually, Gollum lived on a smiley island of rock in the middle of the lake. He was watching Bilbo now from the distance with his pale eyes like telescopes. Bilbo could not see him, but he was wondering a lot about Bilbo, for he could see that he was no goblin at all. Gollum got into his boat and shot off from the island, while Bilbo was sitting on the brink altogether flummoxed, and at the end of his way and his wits. Suddenly, up came Gollum, and whispered and hissed, "Bless us and splash us, my precious! I guess it's a choice feast. At least a tasty morsel it make us Gollum." And when he said Gollum, he made a terrible swallowing noise in his throat. That is how he got his name, though he'd always called himself my precious. The Hobbit jumped nearly out of his skin when the hiss came in his ears, and suddenly saw the pale eyes sticking out at him. "Who are you?" he said, thrusting his dagger in front of him. "What is he, my precious?" Thank you. I'm trying my best with the Gollum voice. Whispered Gollum, who always spoke to himself, though never having anyone else to speak to. This is what he had come to find out, for he was not really very hungry at the moment, only curious. Otherwise he would have grabbed first and whispered afterwards. I am Bilbo Baggins. I have lost the dwarves, and I've lost the wizard, and I don't know where I am, and I don't want to know, if only I can get away. What's he got in his hands? Said Gollum, looking at the sword, which he did not quite like. A sword! A blade made which came out of Gondolin, said Gollum, and became quite polite. Perhaps he sits here and chats a bit. Let's see, my precious. It likes riddles? Perhaps it does it? He was anxious to appear friendly, at any rate for the moment, until he found out more about the sword and the hobbit, whether he was quite alone or really, whether he was good to eat, and whether Gollum was really hungry. Riddles were all he could think of. Asking them, and sometimes guessing them, had been the only game he'd ever played with other funny creatures sitting in their holes in the long, long ago, before he lost all his friends, and was driven away, alone, and crept down, down into the dark under the mountains. Very well, said Bilbo, who was anxious to agree until he found out more about the creature, whether he was quite alone, whether he was fierce or hungry, and whether he was a friend of the goblins. You ask first, he said, because he had not had time to think of a riddle. So Gollum hissed. What has roots as nobody sees, is taller than trees? Up and up it goes, and yet never grows. Easy, said Bilbo. Mountain, I suppose. Does it guess easy? It must have competition with us, my precious. If Precious asks and doesn't answer, we eat it. My precious. If it asks us and we don't answer, then we does what it wants, eh? We show it the way out, yes? I don't know why it's turning into Jar Jar Binks all of a sudden. All right, said Bilbo, not daring to disagree, and nearly bursting his brain to think of riddles that could save him from being eaten. 30 white horses on a red hill. First they champ, then they stamp, and then they stand still. That was all he could think of to ask. The idea of eating was rather in his mind. It was rather an old one too, and Gollum knew the answer as well as you do. Chestnuts, he hissed. Teeth, teeth, my precious, but we only have 6. And he asked his second. Voiceless, he cries, wingless, flutters, toothless, bounces, mouthless, mutters. Half a moment, cried Bilbo, who was still thinking uncomfortably about eating. Fortunately, he had once heard something rather like this before, and getting his wits back, he thought of the answer. Wind! Wind, of course, he said, and he was so pleased that he made up one on the spot. This'll puzzle the nasty little underground creature, he thought. An eye in a blue face saw an eye in a green face. That eye is like to this eye, said the first eye, but in low place, not in high place. Said Gollum. He had been underground a long lost time, and was forgetting this sort of thing. But just as Bilbo was beginning to hope that the wretch had not been able to answer, Gollum brought up memories of ages and ages and ages before, when he lived with his grandmother in a hole in a bank by a river. My precious, he said. Sun on the daisies, it means, it does. But these ordinary above-ground every sort of riddles were tiring for him. Also, they reminded him of days where he'd been less lonely and sneaky and nasty, and that put him out of temper. What is more, they made him hungry. So this time, he tried something with a bit more difficult and a bit more unpleasant. It
cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt. It lies behind the stars and under hills and empty holes it fills. It comes first and follows after, ends life and kills laughter. Unfortunately for Gollum, Bilbo had heard that sort of thing before, and the answer was all around him anyway. Dark, he said, without even scratching his head and putting on his thinking cap. A box without hinges, key or lid, yet golden treasure inside is hid. He asked again to gain time until he could think of a really hard one. This he thought a dreadfully easy chestnut, though he had not asked it in the usual words. But it proved a nasty poser for Gollum. He hissed to himself, and still he did not answer. He whispered and spluttered. After some time, while Bilbo became impatient, "Well, what is it?" he said. "The answer is not a kettle boiling over, as you seem to think from the noise you're making."
"Give us a chance. Give us a chance, my precious."
"Well," said Bilbo, after giving him a long chance, "what about your guess?" But suddenly Gollum remembered thieving from nests long ago, and sitting under the river bank teaching his grandmother to suck.
"Eggs!"
he hissed.
"Eggs it is."
Then he asked,
"Alive, without breath, as cold as death, never thirsty, ever drinking, all in meal, never clinking."
He also, in his turn, thought this was a dreadfully easy one, because he was always thinking of the answer. But he could not remember anything better at the moment. He was so flustered by the egg question. All the same, it was a poser for poor Bilbo, who never had anything to do with the water if he could help it. I imagine you know the answer, of course, or you can guess it as easy as winking, since you are sitting comfortably at home and have not the danger of being eaten to disturb your thinking. Bilbo sat and cleared his throat once or twice, but no answer came. After a while, Gollum began to hiss with pleasure to himself.
"Is it nice, my precious? Is it juicy? Is it scrumptiously comfortable?"
He began to peer at Bilbo out the darkness. "Half a moment," said the Hobbit, shivering. "I gave you a good long chance just now."
"It must make haste, haste,"
said Gollum, beginning to climb out of his boat onto the shore to get at Bilbo. But when he put on his long webby foot in the water, a fish jumped out in a fright and fell on Bilbo's toes. "Ugh!" he said. "It is cold and clammy." And so he guessed. "Fish! Fish!" he cried. "Is it fish?" Gollum was dreadfully disappointed, but Bilbo asked another riddle as quick as he ever could, so that Gollum had to get back into his boat and think. No legs lay on one leg. 2 legs sat near on 3 legs. 4 legs got some. It was not really the right time for this riddle, but Bilbo was in a hurry. Gollum might have had some trouble guessing it if he had asked it another time. As it was, talking of fish, no legs was not so very difficult, and after that the rest was easy.
"Fish on a little table, man at table, sitting on a stool. The cat has the bones."
And that, of course, is the answer, and Gollum soon gave it, though he thought the time had come to ask something hard and horrible. This is what he said.
"This thing all things devours, birds, beasts, trees, and flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard bones, stones to meal, slays kings, ruins town, and beats high mountain down."
Poor Bilbo sat in the dark thinking of all the horrible names of all the giants and ogres he'd ever told in tales. Not one of them had done all these things. He had a feeling that the answer was quite different and that he ought to know it, but he could not think of it. He began to get frightened, and that is bad for thinking. Gollum began to get out of his boat. He flapped into the water and paddled to the bank. Bilbo could see his eyes coming towards him. His tongue seemed to stick out of his mouth. He wanted to shout out, "Give me more time! Give me more time! Give me time!" But all that came out of a sudden squeal was, "Time! Time!" Bilbo was saved by just pure luck. For that, of course, is the answer. Gollum was disappointed once more, and now he was getting angry. And also tired of the game. It had made him very hungry indeed. This time, he did not go back to the boat. He sat down in the dark by Bilbo. That made the Hobbit most dreadfully uncomfortable and scattered his wits.
"It's got to ask us a question, my precious. Yes, just one more question to guess, yes,"
said Gollum. But Bilbo could simply not think of any question with that nasty, wet, cold thing sitting next to him and pawing and poking him. He scratched himself. He pinched himself. Still he could not think of anything.
"Ask us! Ask us!"
said Gollum. Bilbo pinched himself and slapped himself. He gripped on his little sword. He even felt in his pocket with his other hand. And there he found the ring he had picked up in the passage and had forgotten about. "What have I got in my pocket?" He was talking to himself, but Gollum thought it was a riddle, and he was frightfully upset.
"Not fair! Not fair!" he hissed. "It isn't fair, my precious, is it, to ask us what it's got in his nasty little pockets?"
Bilbo, seeing what had happened and having nothing better to ask, stuck to his question. "What have I got in my pocket?" he said louder.
"You must give us 3 guesses, precious. 3 guesses."
"Very well. Guess away," said Bilbo.
"Hanses,"
said Gollum. "Wrong," said Bilbo, who had luckily just taken it out his hand again. "Guess again." "Psst," said Gollum, more upset than ever. He thought of all the things he kept in his own pockets. Fish bones, goblin's teeth, wet shells, a bit of bat wing, a sharp stone to sharpen his fangs on, and other nasty things. He tried to think what other people kept in their pockets.
"Knife,"
he said at last. "Wrong," said Bilbo, who had lost his some time ago. "Last guess." Now Gollum was in much worse state than when Bilbo had asked him the egg question. He hissed and spluttered and rocked himself backwards and forwards and slapped his feet on the floor and wriggled and squirmed, but he still did not dare to waste his last guess. "Come on," said Bilbo, "I'm waiting." He tried to sound bold and cheerful, but he did not feel at all sure how the game was going to end, whether Gollum guessed right or not. "Time's up," he said.
"String or nothing,"
shrieked Gollum, which was not quite fair, working in 2 guesses at once. "Both wrong," cried Bilbo, very much relieved, and he jumped up to his feet at once, put his back to the nearest wall, and held out his little sword. He knew, of course, that the riddle game was sacred and of immense antiquity, and even wicked creatures were afraid to cheat when they played at it. But he felt he could not trust this slimy thing to keep any promise at a pinch. Any excuse would do for him to slide out of it. And after all, that last question had not been a genuine riddle according to the ancient laws. But at any rate, Gollum did not at once attack him. He could see the sword in Bilbo's hand. He sat still, shivering and whispering. At last Bilbo could wait no longer. "Well," he said, "what about your promise? I want to go. You must show me the way."
"Did you say so, precious?" "Show the nasty little buggins the way out. Yes, yes. But what has it got in its pockets, is not string, precious, but not nothing. Oh, no."
"Gollum, never you mind. A promise is a promise."
course it is. Impatient precious,
hissed Gollum.
But it must wait. Yes, it must. We can't go up to the tunnel so hasty. We must go and get some things first. Yes, things to help us.
Well, hurry up, said Bilbo, relieved to think of Gollum going away. He thought he was just making an excuse and did not mean to come back. And what was Gollum talking about? What useful thing could he keep out on the dark lake? But he was wrong. Gollum did mean to come back. He was angry now and hungry, and he was a miserable, wicked creature, and already he had a plan. Not far away on his island, of which Bilbo knew nothing, and there in his hiding place he kept a few wretched oddments and one very beautiful thing. Very beautiful. Very wonderful. He had a ring. A golden ring. A precious ring. Yeah, I'm in a hotel, so I'm doing the best I can with the lighting.
My birthday present,
he whispered to himself, as he had often done in the endless dark days.
That's what he wants now. Yes, he wants it.
He wanted it because it was a ring of power, and if you slipped that ring on your finger, you were invisible. Only in the full sunlight could you be seen, and then only by your shadow, and that would be shaky and faint.
My birthday present, it came to me on my birthday, my precious.
So he had always said to himself. But who knows how Gollum came by that present ages ago, in the old days when rings were still at large in the world? Perhaps even the master who ruled them could not have said. Gollum used to wear it at first, till it tired him, and then he kept it in a pouch next to his skin. Still it galled him, and now usually he hid it in a hole in the rock on his island, and was always going back to look at it. And still, sometimes he put it on, whenever he could not bear to be parted from it any longer, or when he was very, very hungry and tired of fish. Then he would creep along dark passages looking for stray goblins. He might even venture into places where the torches were lit, and made his eyes blink and smart, for he was safe. Oh yes, quite safe. No one would ever see him. No one would ever notice him, till he had his fingers on their throat. Only a few hours ago he had worn it and caught a small goblin imp. How it squeaked! He still had a bone or two left to gnaw, but he wanted something softer.
Quite safe, yes, he whispered to himself. It won't see us, will it, my precious? No, it won't see us, and its nasty little sword will be useless. Yes, quite.
That is what was in his wicked little mind, as he slipped suddenly from Bilbo's side and flapped back to his boat and went off into the dark. Bilbo thought he had heard the last of him. Still, he waited a while, for he had no idea how to find out his way alone. Suddenly, he heard a screech, and it sent a shiver down his back. Gollum was cursing and wailing away in the gloom, not very far off by the sound of it. He was on his island, scrabbling here and there, searching and seeking in vain.
Where is it? Where is it?
Bilbo heard him crying.
Lost it is, my precious. Lost. Lost. Curses and curses, my precious is lost.
What's the matter? Bilbo called. What have you lost?
It mustn't ask us, shrieked Gollum. Not his business, no. Gollum. It's lost. Gollum. Gollum.
Well, so am I, cried Bilbo, and I want to get unlost. And I won the game, and you promised. So come along. Come and let me out, and then go on with your looking. Utterly miserable as Gollum sounded, Bilbo could not find much pity in his heart, and he had a feeling that anything Gollum wanted so much could hardly be something good. Come along, he shouted.
No, not that, precious. We must search for it. It's lost. Gollum.
But you have never guessed my last question,
And you promised, said Bilbo.
Never guessed,
said Gollum. Then suddenly, out of the gloom, came a sharp hiss.
What has it got in its pockets? Tell us that. It must tell us.
As far as Bilbo knew, there was no particular reason why you should not tell. Gollum's mind had jumped to a guess quicker than his, naturally, for Gollum had brooded for ages on this one thing. He was always afraid of its being stolen. Sorry guys, breaking. Immersion breaking. Just muting some folk. Gollum had brooded for ages on this one thing, and he'd always been afraid of its being stolen. But Bilbo was annoyed at the delay. After all, he had won the game pretty fairly at a horrible risk. Answers were to be guessed, not given, he said.
But it wasn't a fair question, said Gollum. Not a riddle, precious, no.
Oh well, if it's a matter of ordinary questions, Bilbo replied, then I asked one first. What have you lost? Tell me that.
What has got in his pockets is...
The sound came hissing louder and sharper, and as he looked towards it, to his alarm, Bilbo now saw 2 points of light peering at him. As suspicion grew in Gollum's mind, the light of his eyes burned with a pale flame. What have you lost? Bilbo persisted. But now the light in Gollum's eyes had become a green fire, and it was coming swiftly nearer. Gollum was in his boat again, paddling wildly back to the dark shore, and such a rage of loss and suspicion was in his heart that no sword had any more terror for him. Bilbo could not guess what had maddened the wretched creature, but he saw that all was up, and that Gollum was meant to murder him at any rate. Just in time, he turned and ran blindly back up the dark passage, down which he had come, keeping close to the wall and feeling it with his left hand.
What has it got in its pockets?
He heard the hiss loud behind him, and the splash as Gollum leapt from his boat.
What have I wonder?
He said to himself as he panted and stumbled along. He put his left hand in his pocket. The ring felt very cold as it quietly slipped onto his groping forefinger. The hiss was close behind him. He turned now and saw Gollum's eyes like green lamps coming up the slope. Terrified, he tried to turn faster, but suddenly he struck his toes on a snag in the floor and fell flat with his little sword under him. In a moment, Gollum was on him. But before Bilbo could do anything, recover his breath, pick himself up, or wave his sword, Gollum passed by, taking no notice of him, cursing and whispering as he ran. What could it mean? Gollum could see in the dark. Bilbo could see the light of his eyes palely shining even from behind. Painfully he got up and sheathed his sword, which was now glowing faintly again. Then very cautiously he followed. There seemed nothing else to do. It was no good crawling back down to Gollum's water. Perhaps if he followed him, Gollum might lead him some way to escape without meaning to. Yeah, apparently, green eyes. Who knew? I don't know if that's literal, or if that's just like... I don't know how literal Tolkien's writing is when it describes Gollum's eyes, but they could be green.
Curse it! Curse it! Curse it!
Hissed Gollum.
Curse the Baggins, it's gone! What has it got in its pockets? Oh, we'll guess, my precious! He's found it. Yes, he must have my birthday present.
Bilbo pricked up his ears. He was at last beginning to guess himself.
He hurried a little, getting as close as he dared behind Gollum, who was still going quickly, not looking back, but turning his head from side to side, as Bilbo could see from the faint glimmer of the walls.
My birthday present? Curse it! How did we lose it, my precious? Yes, that's it. When we came this way last, when we twisted that nasty young squeaker. That's it. Cursed it. It slipped from us. After all these ages and ages, it's gone.
Suddenly, Gollum sat down and began to weep, a whistling, gurgling sound horrible to listen to. Bilbo halted and flattened himself against the tunnel wall. After a while, Gollum stopped weeping and began to talk. He seemed to be having an argument with himself.
It's no good going back to search, no. It doesn't remember all the places we visited. And it's no use. The Baggins has got it in his pockets as the nasty noser has found it, he says. We guesses, precious, only guesses. We can't know till we find the nasty creature and squeezes it. But it doesn't know what the present can do, does it? It just keeps it in its pockets as it doesn't know it can't go far. It's lost itself, the nasty, nosy thing doesn't know the way out. It said so. It said so, yes. But Trixie, it doesn't say what it means. It won't say what it's got in its pockets. It knows. It knows a way in. It must know a way out, yes. It's off to the back door. To the back door, that's it. The goblins will catch it then. It can't get out that way, precious. Skull! Goblins says yes, but if it's got our present, our precious present, then goblins will get it. Gollum, they'll find it. They'll find it out what it does. We shan't ever be safe again, never, Gollum. One of the goblins will put it on, and then no one will see him. He'll be here but not be seen. Not even our clever eyes will notice him and come quickly and just Gollum. Then let's stop talking, precious, and make haste. If the Baggins has gone that way, we must go quick and see. Go! Not far now. Make haste.
With a spring, Gollum got up and started shambling off a great pace. Bilbo hurried after him, still cautiously, though his chief fear now was of tripping on another snag and falling with a noise. His head was in a whirl of hope and wonder. It seemed that the ring he had was a magic ring. It made you invisible. He had heard of such things, of course, in old tales, but it was hard to believe that he really had found one just by accident. Still, there it was. Gollum, with his bright eyes, had passed him by, only a yard to one side. On they went, Gollum flip-flapping ahead, hissing and cursing, Bilbo going as softly as a hobbit can. Soon they came to places where, as Bilbo had noticed on the way down, side passages opened. This way and that, Gollum began at once to count them. 1 left, yes. 1 right, yes. 2 right, yes, yes. 2 left, yes. And so on. As the count grew, he slowed down, and he began to get that shaky and weepy, for he was leaving the water further and further behind, and he was getting afraid. Goblins might be about, and he'd lost his ring. At last he stopped by a low opening on their left as they went up. 7 right, yes. 6 left, yes. He whispered, "This is it. This is the way to the back door. Yes, here's the passage." He peered in and shrank back. "But we don't go in, precious. No, we don't. Goblins is down there. Lots of goblins is. We smells them, yes. What shall we do? Curse them and crush them, but we must wait here, precious. Wait a bit and see." So they came to a dead stop. Gollum had brought Bilbo to the way out after all. But Bilbo could not get in. There was Gollum, sitting humped right in the opening, and his eyes gleamed cold in his head as he swayed it from side to side between his knees. Bilbo crept away from the wall, and more quietly than a mouse. But Gollum stiffened at once, and sniffed, and his eyes went green. He hissed softly, but menacingly. He could not see the hobbit, but now he was on the alert, and his other senses that the darkness had sharpened, hearing and smell. He seemed to be crouched right down with his flat hands splayed on the floor, and his head thrust out, nose almost to the stone. Though he was only a black shadow in the gleam of his own eyes, Bilbo could see or feel that he was tense as a bowstring, gathered for a spring. Bilbo almost stopped breathing and went stiff himself. He was desperate. He must get away, out of this horrible darkness, while he had any strength left. He must fight. He must stab the foul thing, put its eyes out, kill it. It meant to kill him. No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him, or tried to yet. And he was miserable, alone, and lost. Sudden understanding, a pity mixed with horror, welled up in Bilbo's heart. A glimpse of endless, unmarked days without light or hope of betterment, hard stone, cold fish, sneaking and whispering. All those thoughts passed in a flash, in a second. He trembled, and then quite suddenly, in another flash, as if lifted by a new strength and resolve, he leapt. No great leap for a man, but a leap in the dark, straight over Gollum's head. He jumped 7 feet forward and 3 in the air. Indeed, had he known it, he only missed cracking his skull on the low arch of the passage. Gollum threw himself backwards and grabbed as the hobbit flew over him, but too late. His hands snapped on thin air, and Bilbo, falling fair on his sturdy feet, sped off down the new tunnel. He did not see what Gollum was doing. There was a hissing and cursing almost at his heels at first, then it stopped. All at once there came a blood-curdling shriek, filled with hatred and despair. Gollum was defeated. He dared go no further. He lost his prey, and lost too the only thing that he ever cared for, his precious. The cry brought Bilbo's heart to his mouth, but still he held on. Now faint as an echo, but menacing, the voice came behind.
Thief! 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 Baggins will hence it, will hence it, will hence it forever.
Then there was a silence, but that too seemed menacing to Bilbo. If goblins are so near that he smelt them, he thought, then they'll have heard his shrieking and cursing. Careful now, or this way will lead you to worse things. The passage was low and roughly made. It was not too difficult for the hobbit, except when, in spite of all care, he stubbed his poor toes again several times on nasty jagged stones on the floor. A bit low for goblins, at least for the big ones, thought Bilbo, not knowing that even the big ones, the orcs of the mountains, go along at great speed, stooping low with their hands almost on the ground. Soon the passage that had been sloping down began to go up again, and after a while it climbed steeply. That slowed Bilbo down, but at last the slope stopped. The passage turned a corner and dipped down again, and there, at the bottom of a short incline, he saw, filtering round another corner, a glimpse of light. Not red light, as of fire or lantern, but a pale, out-of-doors sort of light. And Bilbo began to run. Scuttling as fast as his legs would carry him, he turned the last corner and came suddenly right out into an open space, where the light, after all that time in the dark, seemed dazzlingly bright. Really, it was only a leak of sunshine in through a doorway, where a great door, a stone door, was left standing open. Bilbo blinked, and then suddenly he saw goblins,
Goblins in full armour with drawn swords sitting just inside the door, watching it with wide eyes and watching the passage that led to it. They were aroused, alert, and ready for anything. They saw him sooner than he saw them. Yes, they saw him. Whether it was an accident or a last trick of the ring before it took a new master, it was not on his finger. With yells of delight, the goblins rushed upon him. A pang of fear and loss, like an echo of Gollum's misery, smote Bilbo, and forgetting even to draw his own sword, he struck his hands into his pockets, and there was the ring still in his left pocket. It slipped on his finger. The goblins stopped short. They could not see a sign of him. He vanished. They yelled twice as loud as before, but not so delightedly. "Where is it?" "Go back up the passage," some shouted. "This way," some yelled. "That way," others yelled. "Look out for the front door," bellowed the captain. Whistles blew, armour clashed, and swords rattled. Goblins cursed and swore rather hither and thither, falling over one another and getting very angry. There was a terrible outcry to do, and disturbance. Bilbo was dreadfully frightened, but he had the sense to understand what had happened and to sneak behind a big barrel which held drink for the goblin guards, and so get out of the way and avoid being bumped into, trampled to death, or even caught by Feel. "I must get to the door. I must get to the door," he kept on saying to himself, but it was a long time before he ventured to try. Then it was like a horrible game of blind man's bluff. The place was full of goblins running about, and the poor little hobbit dodged this way and that and was knocked over by a goblin who could not make out what he bumped into, scrambling away on all fours, slipped between the legs of the captain just in time, got up and ran for the door. It was still ajar, but a goblin had pushed it nearly to. Bilbo struggled, but he could not move it. He tried to squeeze through the crack. He squeezed and squeezed, and he stuck. It was awful. His buttons had gotten wedged on the edge of the door and the doorpost. He could see outside into the open air. There were a few steps running down into a narrow valley between tall mountains. The sun came out from behind a cloud and shone bright on the outside of the door. But he could not get through. Suddenly, one of the goblins inside shouted, "There's a shadow by the door. Someone is getting outside." Bilbo jumped out into his mouth. He gave a terrific squirm. Buttons burst off in all directions. He was through, with a torn coat and waistcoat, leaping through the steps like a goat, while bewildered goblins were still picking up his nice brass buttons on the doorstep. Of course, they came down soon after him, hooting and hallooing and hunting among the trees. But they don't like the sun. It makes their legs wobble and their heads giddy. They could not find Bilbo with the ring on, slipping in and out of the shadow of the trees, running quick and quiet, and keeping out of the sun. So soon they went back grumbling and cursing to guard the door. Bilbo had escaped. There we are. I think we'll leave it there. So, in the last live stream, Bilbo gained his sword, his trusty sword Sting, and now he's gained the One Ring and escaped Gollum. I hope you're enjoying these read-throughs. If you want me to continue, I'm sure I'll hop on in Hobbit costume another night to keep myself entertained more than anything. But I hope you guys are enjoying that. If you missed me reading the start of The Hobbit from the chapter 1, that's up on YouTube now on Scottish Scooby Gang. Please subscribe to the YouTube. We upload all the live streams there. We do a live stream quiz every single Sunday. The next one is BoJack Horseman. In fact, I need to announce the themes for next month. Thank you. Thank you, Seb. Thank you for joining. Seb is, by the way, Sebs are. Yeah, it is tense. It is genuinely a tense story. Like, despite knowing that Bilbo makes it out alive and everything, there is a tension to that scene. That's why I really wanted to get to the Riddles in the Dark tonight. Thank you for all the likes, guys. Thank you for all the support. I'm really glad you enjoyed that. This is something new that I'm trying to do with the Cosplay Storytimes. I did, for World Book Day, I did some Scooby-Doo Choose Your Own Adventure ones. Those really threw out my voice, trying to do all the Shaggy and Scooby voices and things like that, but that was good fun, and people seem to really enjoy that. So now we are 4 chapters into The Hobbit. that it? Jesus. No, 5 chapters. We've done 5 chapters. That's not bad. Done 5 chapters. Thank you, Paul. Hope this week goes a bit better for you. I hope so too. I do. But yeah, I'll keep you posted. You guys, I'll announce the next themes for the quiz just here. I'll do a proper video on it for everyone else. But the next themes are BoJack Horseman, then Thunderbirds, then it is Teen Titans, then X-Men, then Justice League. So the end of April is going to be very superhero heavy, which I'm a bit nervous about because my finances are not in a great position right now. So I'm a bit worried about getting some of those costumes because I don't have the costumes I need for those ones. I've got the costumes for Thunderbirds, but because I'm living in this hotel right now, I also can't really do many arts and crafts at the moment. So if you guys... Thank you. I really appreciate that. As I say, like, the themes change every week, so there'll be ones that you do know, but yeah, I hope they're still entertaining. I'd love to do a Thunderbirds board game on the same day that we're doing the live stream, but I just need to figure out what the logistics of where we're going to host that are going to be. Yeah, you're awesome. Thank you so much, Max. We really appreciate your support. If you are wanting to support us and ensure that our costumes are as good as possible, we do have a coffee set up, ko-fi/Scottish Scooby Gang. This month especially, we could really do with your help in order to yeah, no, it's good fun. William wasn't feeling very well, and things have been pretty dark for him as well. So we really could do with your help. Thank you. We could really do with your help. If because I really wanted to get a Flash costume for the Justice League one. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford that, to be honest. We're really struggling financially at the moment, all of us. So, yeah. Please support us on Coffee, or there's a subscribe function on these live streams. But yeah, I hope you're enjoying this. Please, at the very least, follow the YouTube account, the Scottish Scooby Gang on YouTube. We will start uploading original content on that soon, but right now it's just a place to put all the live streams. So if you've missed any of the live streams, if there's a particular theme that you would have liked to do, you can check out those live streams. You can check out the previous chapters of The Hobbit. You can check out the Scooby-Doo story time we did. Seb and I, along with the others, also did a Scooby-Doo board game playthrough, which was really good fun. So Seb was really the MVP of that, actually doing all the work of learning the rules for that. If I were rich man, the streams would be... Yeah, no, I mean, that's the dream, is for this to actually start making us money. But at the moment, it just doesn't. Even that viral video really didn't make us any money. Thank you so much, Max. Last 10 minutes of The Simpsons Live. Oh, don't panic, Tony. Tony. Oh, by the way, Tony, you're the winner. If you would like a little prize given out to, we're going to try and organise a little prize for you. I don't know what that prize will be. It'll be something silly and Simpsons themed, maybe a Simpsons comic or something. I don't know. We'll try and find something for you. But if you would like that, send us a little message on Instagram, and we'll sort that out for you, and we'll sign it, whatever we send to you. For the anime one, we sent a death note signed, and we all predicted our own deaths. So we'll do something silly for The Simpsons. But yeah, well done, Tony. You won. Congratulations, you won the Simpsons quiz. Thank you so much for joining.
So yeah, next week is BoJack Horseman. So we're gonna stick with the adult animated comedy. That one could get quite dark, just by the nature of that show. Yeah, you did incredibly well. Incredibly well, Tony. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, so we are going to try and give out gifts during, to the winners. We've done a few, but obviously that's harder when we're, not in a financial position to buy stuff. So usually it's just little elements from the cosplay, like, the Puss in Boots sword or something like that. Yeah. 4,000 likes. Thank you so much, guys. You guys seem to really enjoy these story times. Let me know if I should do more story times. When I did the Scooby-Doo one, we only got through 2 of the Choose Your Own Adventure Scooby-Doo books. So let me know if you'd like me to do the other 2. Obviously those ones are a bit, those stories skew a bit younger. Did the Shrek headband get to Gracie in the end? No, we need to... So Cammy still needs to sign the sword and the headband, and then we're going to send it on to Grace. Thank you for reminding us. We will get that done. Yeah, we do definitely need to get that done. But Cammy's been very busy. It's been a hectic couple of weeks for all of us, and as I say, I'm living out of a hotel right now because my flat is uninhabitable, so I'm having a really shitty time. I would love to do Dungeons and Dragons, Seb. That's on you to DM one for us. I think that'd be really, really good fun. Yeah, but yeah, please, if you have the means and are able to support us on Coffee, that could really help with the live streams, because William and I want to get X-Men and Justice League costumes. But at the moment that's looking challenging. So it might be a very homespun version, kind of similar to William's Shrek costume. It might be homespun from what we have. But we will always try and make the effort to be in costume. Yesterday I painted myself yellow. So I really did try and go full hog for the Simpsons one. It's not great at the moment. Meaning a quiz. Oh, God. You want to do a quiz on Dungeons & Dragons? That's not a bad idea, actually. But again, you would probably have to host it. That would be fun, though. That's a good idea. We'll put that on the list. Thank you. Yeah, the Flanders one. People were thirsting over Flanders quite a bit there. That was a bit worrying. At the moment, being in my hotel right now, I've limited access to some of my cosplays, so I went home and I got this one, and I've got my, I've got the occasional cosplay, but yeah, things are difficult right now. I can't go spending £200 on cosplays right now. I just can't. I'd love to get the quality. Scooby-Doo quiz just about the villains. That would be interesting. There are ones we want to do. So obviously we do one every single Sunday, and we have done Scooby-Doo. Eventually we will probably repeat themes, but we have the next year kind of planned out for the quizzes. But on special anniversaries, or special days, like May the 4th lands on a Thursday, we're thinking of doing a special Star Wars live stream for the Scooby-Doo anniversary for the 13th of September. I'm really sad that I just know that off the top of my head. 13th of September, we could totally do an extra Scooby-Doo one if you wanted. That would be good fun. Obviously, the Scooby-Doo content has been... the Creeper. Yeah, that's one we want to get William dressed up as, because when we played the Scooby-Doo board game, the villains you could choose from are the Creeper, the Ghost Clown, and the Green Ghost. And William's already dressed up as the Clown and the Green Ghost for videos. So we're like, we need to get him dressed as the Creeper at some point. Tell you what, if you are into Scooby-Doo Max, then please check out that Scooby-Doo board game by Chaos Cards. They have some really cool stuff, and if
if you buy the Scooby-Doo board game that we were promoting, you could be in with a chance of winning a signed copy of another Scooby-Doo board game that we've got. So please, if you fancy a Scooby-Doo board game, it's actually a really good board game if you're into it, and it's got the Creeper. Yeah, it's called Scooby-Doo. It's just called Scooby-Doo the board game. And if you go on Chaos Cards, they should have it. And let me know if you do buy it, and we can send you that signed copy of Escape from Haunted Mansion, which is another one, which we haven't played yet. We will. Oh, brilliant! You saw that one. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, people really seem to enjoy it. I mean, obviously, that's why we changed the channel. So originally this account was called Hawkeye of Hawk Hill, because it was just me, and I'm a Hawkeye cosplayer, and I live in Hawk Hill. But by nature of that viral video, and by nature of William and Nick becoming frequent collaborators and becoming my co-hosts, and by Seb and Michael and Emma and folk joining all the time, and Olivia, by the fact that they joined to make content regularly, we decided to rebrand as the Scottish Scooby Gang. And that seems to have been really successful. Like, people really seem to be into the Scooby-Doo content, which is lovely, because Scooby-Doo is a massive thing that's really near and dear to my heart. Yeah, it got very tense. We almost lost it. We almost botched it. No, it was genuinely a really good game. And I have a Thunderbirds one, which is kind of similar in structure, where the game plays against you and you got to work cooperatively. But we also have a role-playing version, so we might do a role-playing Thunderbirds live stream on the 9th, if we can get everyone together. Or whoever we get together. We'll just do it with whoever. But yeah, things are difficult right now. Please, 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 I am begging you, if you can support us on Coffee, please do, because it genuinely will help us out in the next coming months. But yeah, please also just share the word about our live streams, about our channel. Yeah, I love role-playing games. Role-playing games are great. Because if you guys spread the word, then we can get more costumes, because despite having about 10 different Marvel costumes, I don't have a single X-Men costume, which is kind of crazy. In and out of bed. Yep, keep it to yourself, Seb. I don't want to know what you and Olivia get up to. Funnily enough, my Fred Ascot has seen a fair bit of action in that realm, but that's... no problem, Max. Thank you. No, genuinely, even just this would be amazing. Just the support. Yeah, let people know. Let people in your social circle know about the account if you've got nerdy friends. Tell them about the live streams. We really want to grow the audience. We've got a lot of video ideas we want to make. What's a coffee? So KO-FI it's almost like a Patreon. It's almost like a donation thing. We don't really have perks set up at the moment, so it's really just a donation system. If we get a fair amount of followers, we could set up a perks thing. But I want to make it clear that not supporting us financially will not lock you out of any content. Well, I really don't feel comfortable doing putting our content behind any kind of paywall. But there might be ones. It might be like, oh, we send you a little something, or we we do a live stream chat or something like that. There'll be perks like that, maybe. Yeah, coffee. Yeah, KO-FI/Scottish Scooby Gang, and if you're able to support us, it would genuinely mean the world, because obviously nature of those live streams is we dress up every single time, and eventually we're gonna run out of costumes. We're gonna need to get new costumes, and we want those costumes to be of good quality. We want them to be proper cosplays, not just shitty thrown together things. But at the moment, things are a bit difficult. As I say, I'm currently kind of homeless. Does not feel good right now until I get my flat in order.
Under Scottish Scooby Gang. Yeah. Scottish Scooby Gang. You'll see the pictures match the ones on the account, you know, of us with the mystery machine, so you'll know you've got the right one. That would mean the world. Thank you. If you are able, that genuinely means the world, Tony. And we'll probably, if you want, as I say, we'll get you something. We'll send you a little something when we're financially able. Just as a thank you, a little Simpsons theme thank you, to denote that you were the winner as a little trophy. Don't know what that's going to be yet, but we'll find something. But also, if you do financially support us, you know, we've had Chris and we've had Grace support us. We can maybe set up like a live stream chat or something, or do something over Zoom or something like that. I don't know, whatever it might be. All the costumes essentially have been provided by one average. Yeah. Yeah. The pretty much the huge majority of costumes are all mine, even the ones William is wearing. Yeah. But well, to be fair, your Aragorn costume, Seb, that's yours. But yeah, things are tough. I want to expand my cosplay collection, and I want to get a Flash costume. That's the costume I desperately want. How's William feeling today? I have not spoken to him today, but I will pass on that you're thinking of him, and I'll send him your love. I think he's still feeling a bit rough. I suppose yeah, I mean, I did see him today because I woke up on the couch and he was on the other couch. But yeah, we're both still dying, honestly. Don't worry about a prize. I was lucky. The subject I watched it since it began. Jesus, wow. What, from 1989? Jesus. Mace Windu and Aragorn are dropping the ocean. Yeah. Yeah. Seb is our Mace Windu, and our Scooby Doo and our Aragorn. So if you want to see Seb in action, check out the Scooby Doo. If Scooby Doo was Scottish, check out the live stream where we play the board game, and also check out the Lord of the Rings quiz live stream that he joined us for, which was great. Because Seb's a massive Lord of the Rings fan. So yeah, things are inarguably not great, but yeah, supporting coffee would mean the absolute world. Anything you could donate, it will go towards costumes. No, costumes are not cheap. I mean, my Iron Man suit cost an insane amount. Oh, you remember doing the Bartman? Wow. God, I kind of want to find something Bartman themed to send you now. That's funny. But yeah, BoJack Horseman. If you haven't seen BoJack Horseman, which is next week's quiz, I thoroughly recommend BoJack Horseman. But it is dark. Like, for an anime comedy, it has some really dark, like, trigger-worthy themes. So go into it with caution if you're prone to triggers such as addiction or suicidal ideation, things like that. But it can be really funny as well, like Todd shenanigans and things like that. But yeah, if you get a chance, it's on Netflix, and then you'll do reasonably well, I think. I think that one might be quite a niche theme, the BoJack one. We did the A-Team one, and we ended up just kind of entertaining ourselves, because not many people knew the A-Team that well. I think it was a very niche thing, but it was the 40th anniversary, so we wanted to do something special. Hi, Tea Party Dazzler. Yeah, but thank you guys. I'm glad you guys enjoyed another read-through of The Hobbit. I'm really glad we got to Riddles in the Dark. So if you missed any of it, check. It'll get uploaded to YouTube within this week, hopefully. Now we're just chatting. There is a subscribe function on these live streams if you want to support us that way, but coffee is probably the most direct way to support us. ko-fi. I've subbed. Thank you so much, Max. I really appreciate that. That means the world. Yeah, spread the word about the YouTube. I used to YouTube a lot. Like that again. That channel used to be called something different. It was Paul the Koala Baby. It was an old high school nickname, and I used to upload. And a lot of the stuff I look back on and go like, you know, one of the big things, one of the series I had on that where I got my friends around was called Drunk Discussions. And given that I'm now 2 years sober, I don't really want that reflecting who I am now. Not to mention, the quality of those videos wasn't brilliant, especially the ones I edited myself. The ones that Russell edited for me were a lot higher quality, but the ones I sort of edited myself, I was never that strong, but I'd like to get back into. Where do I keep my costumes? I keep them in my flat. I keep them like they're covered wall to wall, so I've curated sections. So I have like a Scooby-Doo section and a Lord of the Rings section and a whole room dedicated towards Marvel and all my Marvel costumes. But right now, I'm temporarily homeless and sleeping in a hotel right now because my neighbours had a leak, so my flat's been uninhabitable. So luckily, none of the cosplays have been damaged, but I need to get my flat back in order. So some of the cosplays are at Seb's house. Some of them are sitting in my hotel room right now, including this Hobbit one. And most of them are at home still. So accessing my costumes is a lot harder right now. Like we're going to a Mandalorian quiz and I had to make sure I had my lightsabers and stuff like that tomorrow. Yeah, it's rough. But yeah. Any news on it getting fixed? Kinda. So the leak's now been fixed, but the damage is still astronomical. My insurance had to pay for it because my neighbours didn't have insurance and weren't lifting a finger. This has been going on since Christmas, mind you. Yeah, I keep them around. How many do you think you have? I have at least 40 different costumes, I think. Some of them are designed to not be worn by me, so a lot of the Thunderbirds one, they were designed with very specific people in mind. So like Thunderbird 3, the boots don't really fit me, but the Thunderbird 4 one does. Yeah, except there's capes. Yeah, I'm pro capes. I don't care about them being There's nothing more confidence boosting than wearing a cape. Yeah. So yeah, I probably have about 30 different cosplays that I have, and then I have a few more that like my friends I designed for my friends. So like Plo Koon, I made Plo Koon from Star Wars. I made a helmet for that. That was for my friend Paddy. I made all of Thunderbird's costumes from Thunderbird's Argo. Yeah, there's been a few of those. Comic-Con's always a big one. Kind of the nice thing about having all those costumes is you can just say, let's all do a group costume, and you're just like, I have, like, let's be the Avengers for an Avengers quiz, and we all went, and that's kind of nice. Is that like a ready-made costume, or do you just have... I already had this waistcoat. I'm just eccentric. I just dress eccentrically. This is what I call my generic fantasy jacket, my generic fantasy tailcoats, because it works for hobbits, it works for pirates, it works for Dungeons and Dragons, it works for wizards. So it kind of works for everything. These tailcoats, this red tailcoat. But yeah, and then I've just got these are like hunting, whatever they're called, +4s or whatever they're called. So they're proper like nice comfy. What was I going to say? RAF, Army or Navy? None. I am steadfastly anti-military. I hate the military with a fiery passion. Yeah, I'm a pacifist. I don't even wear poppies. There's going to be a controversial thing. That's going to lose me followers. Because they're warmongers and murderers.
I might be there this Sunday. Oh, brilliant. Are you wanting to cosplay, Cammy? Because if so, you're in charge of figuring out which character you want to be from BoJack. I'll sometimes wear a white poppy for the conscientious objectors, but I just tend to avoid it at all costs, to be honest. I mean, I'll leave it with me. I can't be making costumes at the moment, obviously, because I'm homeless, and I don't have any money, so we'll figure it out. We'll figure out BoJack next week. I want to do BoJack, and I was gonna get myself a horse mask. But I don't know if I can afford one right now. So yeah, please support some coffee, and we can try and get some costumes for. We've planned April's themes. Going, yeah, we have plenty of time to get those costumes, but a lot of stuff's got in the way. That seems like Oh, thank you, Cammy. Well, if that's the case, we'll figure that out. I'll message you. Cool. Well, I'm in a hotel and it's currently 11:30 and I don't want to piss off the people next to me, so I'm probably going to call this quits, but thank you so much. It was nice chatting at the end of this. Yeah. So, if you are interested, I will continue my Hobbit read-throughs another night. We'll try and maybe get through... Where are we? We've just got out of Gollum's cave, so we'll try and maybe get to the Eagles. Maybe to Rivertown? No, Mirkwood. But we'll see. Night-night, guys.